Good morning, Tava Baird.
Good morning, gente. How are you?
I am well. I am getting more and more well by the day, even though my voice is not entirely reflective of that yet. But I am on the mend after 2 weeks of being sick.
You sound so much better than you did. I'm so glad you're healing up.
Yes, me as well.
Oh,
And I know you've had a very active, gosh, every day, I think, since the
yeah.
last podcast.
I just think it's so funny that Samael was telling us that it was going to be this time where things were going to settle and we were going to get things done and it was going to be kind of a drawing in. And I'm like, if this is drawing in,
Yeah,
ah,
what is the expansion going to be like?
what
Because
is
this
the
is an
expansion?
intensification of what we've been experiencing. And this is, yeah, this was like supposedly the downtime. So,
This is the downtime. I know. I'm already like, how many weeks until September and October is?
yeah, boy, take
I've
it one day at a time.
I've been enjoying doing, in and amongst other things, I've been enjoying creating a whole new type of poppet lately. And I now have a lovely, lovely dolly that I take with me when I do my spirit work. And I'm totally in love with her. And I also have been doing a lot of writing lately, and it's been really nice to do that. And I know you and Keith have been reading chapters as they come out. And so
Yeah, I
I
have
want
to
to
say
thank you
it's
for that.
really, really, really good. All of the readers, you can thank Keith and I for spurring on the reading because we'll read a couple chapters and my husband's texting her going, "Write faster, write faster."
And it's working too. I think the first several books in Spiral Pathways, I would write a couple chapters, send it to someone, write a couple chapters, and there was this constant sort of feedback loop going, which made me, like if you're an actor, it's always more fun to perform in front of an audience. If you're writing, it's great to see people excited about stuff as it's coming out. And when you're like, oh, okay, that scene did hit the way I wanted it to hit. So, it was funny when you guys came over the other day and Keith was like, I don't have any Tava Baird books to read. I went in and I was like, all right, let's speed this up. And so now I'm sitting down every night and turning out more. So the Book of High Places is coming along at a nice clip.
And it is
So
so good. Oh my gosh, it is
it's like,
so good. We're like, I don't think either of us are capable of reading without like exclaiming things as we go along. We're like, oh man, oh my gosh. And then he's like, we're in, like, we're both reading at the same time. He's like, where are you? We're like, where are you that I can say something, I can comment on what's happening yet. So
I'm
yeah,
I'm
it's
so,
fantastic. And this is what, like,
thank
just the
you.
first chapter or
We
something?
so the prologue's all done, and the piece I sent you yesterday was the end of part one. Most of the time, the Spiral Pathways books have like four big parts. And this was a shorter part one because it was pretty much the exposition. It was kind of bringing you up to speed on what happened in the last book and then advancing forward. There's a lot of talking and people kind of figuring out what they're going to do. But the next section is hardcore action and a huge bunch of mysteries that have been kind of floating out there through the main series and the prequel series. Like everything's starting to gel, where you have characters or events that happened that didn't make any sense, and now all the strings are coming together where you go, oh my gosh, like this piece was actually a result of this thing over here that seemed unrelated. So I'm
Oh man.
super excited. Yeah, the characters are about to skip out off of Earth again and go to their respective places, and the two main storylines are rolling along. So
Oh man,
yeah,
I kind
lots
of
of
feel
fun
like this
stuff.
is like what we've been talking about of like, if this is the downtime, like what does the next part? Because I mean, we've been like enthralled and exclaiming all kinds of stuff and this is just the setup. Like I feel like it's
Oh,
just
this
like
is
our
the
lives. I'm
setup.
like, "Oh my gosh, what's going to happen when the stuff actually starts happening from your perspective?"
Well, the magician has a lot of secrets and they start getting opened up sort of against his will in the rest of
Oh,
this book.
so I am
So
so excited for all of the other readers who are in our kind of position who just cannot wait. If you're not caught up yet, enjoy everything that you have because it's just gonna keep getting better.
yeah, and Samael is character in Bone Witch, a character modeled on him. And he has a much bigger part in the Book of High Places. So if you kind of want to see a walking, talking, interacting version of him, but in that world, it's really interesting to get to write him from that perspective,
Yeah,
so
that's been a really neat thing to see him as a character and see him interacting with the characters that we love. And I cannot wait to see how all of that progresses. So, and I know you said that you had a fun story that you were going to tell me
I
before we
do.
sang or before I
Okay.
sang.
So this is just sort of a funny when I look at this story, I think this is my life now, right? Like 5 years ago, we didn't have the podcast. I was teaching full time, all these things. But when this happened yesterday, I went, yeah, this is my life now. So yesterday, I spent the entire day out at the Blue Ball Inn. I taught 2 benefit classes for the inn. We had an absolute blast. And after class, I was hanging out with Joseph, who owns the inn, and a couple other people who are regular volunteers there who are absolutely dear friends. And to back up a little bit, I've been doing a lot of spirit communication work over the last maybe month or 2 months, like a lot. And there was a particular, I guess the easiest way to just say it is haunted doll on the second floor of the inn. And I had been asked to go and communicate with that spirit maybe like 2 or 3 weeks ago. So I went up and had that happen and ended up getting a whole bunch of names and a whole bunch of information that was later independently verified by during a paranormal investigation this last weekend. So anyway, I now have this relationship with the spirit in this doll. And the paranormal investigators had gotten some other information that they thought might be related to the doll. And people wanted to verify it. And so I'm there at the end of class hanging out, and everyone's like, we go upstairs right now and have you talk to the doll again. And I said, okay, I don't have Matilda, who is my spirit communication poppet that adds protection for me. I don't have my oils. Like all I had on was my normal little pendant because I had not expected to be doing anything like this. And they're like, oh, come on, we're all here. It won't take very long. And I said, guys, I'll do it, but I don't have all of my protective stuff. So everyone starts diving into their bags looking for protective things. And my friend Ashley comes out with this little tiny poppet she made in a class. It's probably 4 inches tall. It is well loved. And she hands it to me and she says, here, you can use my protection poppet. And I said, thank you. So we go upstairs and communicating with the doll sort of necessitated holding the doll. So I can't hold the poppet and the haunted doll at the same point. I know, first world problems, right? So I don't know what to do with the doll. So I take not the doll, sorry, the poppet. So I take the little tiny protection poppet and I put it in the neckline of my shirt so that it's between me and the object that spirit is attached to because I'm out of hands. And as I'm sitting there talking and all this time goes on, I didn't realize it, but the poppet fell down my shirt into my bra. Right. And of course, I have like protective jewelry on that's tucked inside my shirt. So I don't even notice. So we're up there with the doll, with the haunted doll for like an hour. We have really good conversation, get a lot of interesting information. We come down, everybody hugs me goodbye. I hug them goodbye. I get in my car and I'm driving home. And as I pull into the driveway, I get a text from Ashley that says, my poppet is in your boobs. And so much magical crud on my person that I did not remember or notice that there was a 4-inch poppet stuffed into my cleavage. And I just started laughing. Like, what do you say to that? Do you be like, I'm so sorry, I'll clean it off and give it back to you? I literally had a poppet wedged in my breasts. So I was like, honey, we are going to trademark this Boob Poppets for when your hands are full of haunted dolls. And start our own little business that is tiny, tiny protective people that you can jam into your underwire. Yeah. So anyway, that was yesterday. We inadvertently invented Boob Poppets.
That's fantastic. Well, it's funny. I know so many people that like walk around with crystals like stuffed in their bras. When I used to
Hmm.
do talks about crystals and things at the shop that where we both used to vend,
Yeah.
and there would be people and we would start talking about crystals and what kinds of crystals, and there would be like five women around and we're sitting there talking, and next thing you know everybody's reaching into their bra and pulling out handfuls of crystals. They're like, oh yeah, I always walk around with one of those, and they like just reach and they're like, well, where else are we supposed to keep them?
It's actually really funny. Yeah. Joseph was like, it's not fair. Women, like, he goes, how many of you witches have stuff jammed in your bras? And we're like, oh, dude. He's like, it's not fair. Men don't have that. I'm like, yeah, men got a lot of other advantages other than extra keepsake space.
Yeah,
Oh,
I think they have more than enough.
I think I just got the brand name. Titty Talismans. I think that should be what it is. What do you think?
That's fantastic.
Anyway, so
Oh
yes,
goodness.
you know you're a witch when you have crystals, an entire 4-inch poppet, and a bunch of other stuff crammed down the front of your shirt and don't notice.
Oh, that's fantastic. I love it. So today's going to be another adventure. We have some ideas, but we're going to just kind of see where this goes. We both had so many things happen that I feel like any number of wacky, extraordinary kinds of things are likely to surface as a result. So we're just going to go ahead and move into me singing, and just as always inviting Samael and Michael and Gabriel to sing through me and bring through whatever energy is in the highest good of this session, this conversation, and setting this space for all of us to be here together and learn and expand.
Okay. So there's a story. Jen, this is Jen's story. And it's a really interesting one. And I must admit, I heard the story over Marco's just this morning. And Samael was speaking to me a little bit about them before we got on the podcast. So the words I just got from him are sort of a continuation of what he was saying. But I think you all will really like it. And it's on the topic of miracles. And Jen, would you like to start with that super interesting number and where it led you?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Um, Gosh, so I think I talked at one point about how I had been in a dream class and I've been working with dreams, and I found that dreams have come up with a lot of really important messages for me and for everyone. I think they do. And I woke up maybe a week ago, and the only thing I remembered from my dream was the number 25290, the number of growth, the number of lessons. And I woke up thinking, what in the world? But immediately I felt how important it was, but I really didn't have a good sense of what was happening. But this number really stuck with me. And so I thought, okay, I got up and immediately wrote it down. And I had multiple feelings about the number when I woke up. And I knew when I have a dream or something like that, one of the things that you can do is tap into how you feel around it. So it may not be something where you have any sort of instant understanding of a message, but if you can immediately record some of the things and how you feel around it, that can be a place to start. And I had a couple different feelings. The one was the idea that the growth and, a number of growth and lessons, that these were hard lessons. It was like something where you have to learn these lessons. You have to go through this in order for the growth. And there was some kind of trepidation and feeling of work around that. I also had a feeling that the 252, it felt like balance in some way to me, and the 90 felt like 9 being the end and 0 being the beginning. But outside of that, I didn't really have much of anything. And I was telling my husband about it, I was telling Tava about it, and his first instinct was to Google that number and just see what happened. And the thing that really stood out to him was that it was a postal code for a city in Mexico. And I definitely have a strong ancestral sort of connection there, not in my biological lineage, but there is a real soul remembering. I feel like I've had a lot of lifetimes in Mexico in sort of like a Mayan medicine person, shamanistic kind of background. And so the fact that there was something in Mexico definitely resonated. And he was saying that the thing that that city is most known for is this specific type of dance that is said to have kind of originated there. And there are lots of stories of who historians have said no, it's mainly influenced by things from the Spanish conquistadors and stuff, but it's the town really identifies with this specific ritual dance. And I believe it was called the Matachines. And it's specifically done in celebration of the Virgin of Guadalupe, or Our Lady of Guadalupe. And So I thought, okay, well, maybe I need to look in. There's something about dance because, obviously there's lots of dance stuff with me. And that kind of really stood out where it was like, okay, maybe there's some sort of lesson. There's something around this dance. But I hadn't really done anything with it. I hadn't gone into looking it up or watching any of the dances online or done any of that yet. And I was sitting around the other day, and I know we've mentioned the cardinal before. I'm sitting on the couch and the cardinal starts pecking at the window again. And I was like, oh, what do I need to do now? Like, what's going to happen? And the cardinal tends to be a representative of my ancestors. And then I realized, oh my goodness, today's Saturday. Saturday's my day where I have my practice where I go down to the garden and I connect with the ancestors. And I hadn't done that morning because the weather was really terrible. And I thought, sitting down there is going to be too distracting because of the weather. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to sit here and I'm going to connect with my ancestors. And I did like a shamanic journey where I envisioned myself getting up, walking the path down to the garden. I could hear the sound of the garden gate opening and clinking. I sat there and felt all the feelings. So I was like, okay, I'll connect with the ancestors like this. And I ended up having this whole big experience of, it was like the ancestors were sending in all, like, kind of flooding me with all of these images of old, really painful, difficult memories and feelings. And it stirred up all this stuff in me. And I was like, oh boy, this is a lot. I mean, it was like the deepest, most painful things that I have. And they were just sort of putting it all in front of me. And I realized I need to create this chalice and do a divine alchemy, high alchemy kind of practice where I put it all into this chalice and had it transformed then and through this whole process. And so I'm putting it all in there and doing this. And at some point, so I'm holding this chalice and I'm holding all of the images and all of the emotions and things in the like container of my awareness. And I'm doing these divine alchemy things. And at some point, I see myself in my mind's eye, like stand up and move over. And I turn around and look, and there's this old looking wooden school kind of chair. And on the seat of the chair is the number. It was almost like sort of an industrial stamped kind of number, is that number again, 25290. Okay. Here it's coming up. I hadn't really done anything. I hadn't really delved into it. And it didn't dawn on me later, too, that the whole idea of lessons, and I saw that as being on like a school chair. And it was like I'd been sitting on this, and this is only just occurring to me now. I had been actually sitting in the chair with that number written underneath of it and holding this chalice filled with these really difficult lessons and these things that I needed to learn how to move through, and I needed to learn how to move past all of these feelings. And it just dawned on me that I got up from that and moved out, and that this is only really just occurring to me now. So I get up and the process continues, and there's all kinds of stuff in it, but it eventually, the chalice sort of was sent off and received by the divine, and there was all of this sort of cleansing of my hands and things, and I was met by different divine guides which supported me, and I left it, but I still didn't feel great. It was like I felt like, oh, I've just kind of been trudging around in all of my deepest, most painful stuff. And I really thought that the energy of that by the end was going to be like, oh, I feel so much better, everything's great. And it was like, yeah. And Keith was like, well, I think we need to let go of the expectation of how long it might take you to sort of recover from that, and expecting that you're immediately going to just feel fantastic. Probably not reasonable or fair. So let's just let it go. So I was like, okay, yeah, all right. I really just want it to be really totally over and let it go. But as I was just even telling him the story, I started feeling better, like just describing it. And so I was telling him and Marcoing Tava at the same time, but I started feeling better as I started going through it. So I was like, okay, I need to look more into this number. There's still more that I need to do. So I Google it again. I find that city, which I have no chance of pronouncing properly, in Mexico, but I think it's near Mexico City.
Okay.
So I Google the city. I don't really know anything much about it. I start watching these videos about the Matachines, and there's actually a whole group of men who call themselves the Matachines. And this is a sacred dance that they pass on from grandfather to father to son to grandson. And it's a very sacred thing that they do. And they specifically do it, like I said, in honor of the Virgin of Guadalupe. And there's a specific feast day for her that I believe is December 12th. And that's the day that they do this. And so I was sitting and I was like, it's apparently only done by men. It's not something that I really resonate with. I'm trying to figure out what it is. And I was like, I don't even know who the Virgin of Guadalupe is. Like, maybe I should look that up. So I started looking it up, and it is absolutely incredible. It is this whole story of a man named Juan Diego who was very, very impoverished, kind of the very lowest of the social rungs at this time. And this is in 1530 something, I want to say like 31, in like central Mexico. At the time that the Aztec Empire, they were still doing thousands of human sacrifice because the Aztec god demanded human sacrifice. And that was something that was common to the point of like thousands and thousands of people every year being sacrificed. And then the Spanish came in and conquered the Aztecs and kind of put an end to most of that around, I think it was 1520. And anyway, this man named Juan Diego is just, this poor man. He's walking up over this hill and he has an apparition of the Virgin Mary, who shows up to him and says, I want you to build a chapel here on this hill and in my honor. And this will be a place where people can come and receive my love and compassion. And so he was, overwhelmed. He ran into the city where there was an archbishop and told the archbishop, who was like, yeah, we're going to need a little bit more than that. Like, so he left really disheartened. And then over a period of days, it wasn't very long, she showed up again. Like, it may have even been the next day, and was like, you need to go and try again. Tell them I've come to you. And he goes again, and the archbishop, I think just by the fact that he showed up again, was like, all right, he interviewed him and interrogated him a little bit more. Was like, okay, if this is the case, then we are going to ask her for a sign that is really clear and that will let us know that, yes, we are supposed to build a chapel on this hill. And so, they put that out there, and it had been a couple days, and his uncle was extremely ill, and like on his last days of life, like very, very ill. And he was like, I don't have time to deal with this whole apparition stuff. I don't have time to deal with any of this stuff. And he apparently had to go, I don't know if it was like to town, but he went a different route instead of over this particular hill where she had appeared to him, thinking, I just need to avoid this. Like, I just can't deal with this today. And she appeared to him again and was like, am I not your mother? Like, in the sense of the great mother, kind of like, do I not care for you? Your uncle is healed, and you need to go to the hill and gather the roses there, and this will be your sign. And so this was in December. So it was, I believe, December 12th. So even in Mexico, there are no flowers blooming in this part of Mexico at this time. The roses were Castilian roses, which were not even native to the area. Like, there wouldn't have been roses. There wouldn't have been anything in bloom. And so he goes up on the top of that hill again, and there are all these roses in full bloom. So he's gathering them up, and she apparently appears again and is helping to load up there's something called a Tilma, like a really rough, almost burlappy kind of cape that they would wear and just kind of have tied around them to help to protect them from the elements. And so if you imagine, like a kid and you're trying to gather things and you don't have anything, you kind of like flip up the end of your shirt and stuff it full of apples and just sort of hold it up there as a container. This is what they did with his Tilma. They sort of lifted it up, and the Virgin Mary, apparently filled it with all of these roses. And so he has them all bundled up in this tilma, and he goes running to the archbishop and is like, look, I have the proof. And he's standing there before him and drops the tilma, and all of the roses fall. And as the rose petals fall, the archbishop falls to his knees and is like, oh my goodness. And Juan Diego was trying to figure out why he was kneeling before him, because he was like, look at the flowers, like this is the proof. But on his tilma, where the roses had been all up against it, when he dropped it, there was this whole image that looks like an old painting of the Virgin Mary. And it has all of the symbols around it, all of the symbolism and all these things. There's a moon, and she's standing in front of the sun, and all of the symbolism in it are things that would apparently have been very impactful and really understood by the Aztecs. And there were stars all around her, and I think she was standing on a winged serpent, which had a lot of meaning to them as far as conquering evil. And so there this is on his tilma, like it's just there, like it just appeared. And so they were instantly convinced that this was a miracle, despite the fly. It's like at that point, the idea of the flowers was like nothing compared to this. And so they were incredibly moved by the fact that there was this big miracle, and then, built the temple and kept that tilma. And so people would come, kiss it and rub objects on it and touch it. And it was really brilliant and beautiful. So this was I think it was like 1531 or 37, somewhere around there, 500 years ago. And it was made of agave fibers, which are known to deteriorate in a maximum of like 15 to 20 years. It is still in perfect condition. The colors on it are brilliant. And they have had now scientists and all of these people investigating it and looking at it, and they're saying that what the colors are made of is not paint, and it is not a dye or anything that comes from anything on earth. Like it's not a vegetable dye, it's not some sort of mineral, it didn't come from an animal. They don't know what the substance is that the color's made of. There are absolutely no brush strokes on it anywhere. And they're saying it's impossible to paint something and not have some sort of hint of a brushstroke. So there's all this proof that it could not have been made by human hands. And then there are all these additional things. So the eyes, I think this is so fascinating. The eyes of the woman, so she's looking down, and so it's not like she's looking straight forward and she has eyes that you're really looking into and noticing. So hundreds of years later, they start having the ability to magnify this image. So when they get to the point where they can magnify it, I think it was in like 1830 something, somebody noticed from a photograph when they expanded it that it looked like there were reflections in the eyes. And then now they've magnified it. I think it's like 2,500 to 3,000 times magnification. And in it are these reflections, these images of what looks to be the people that were in the room at the time that he dropped the tilma and the flowers fell. And it's been analyzed by all of these top ophthalmologists who are showing that it follows exactly the kind of these certain rules or laws of ophthalmology where, if something is reflecting in someone's eyes, it's going to appear on a certain part of their eye on one side and a different part of their eye on the other side. Certain places in it it's inverted. And so these were things that were not even known in the 1500s. And the eyeballs are so small that there's nothing in existence that would allow you to paint or create this. The other thing is there's something about it there, and I don't really understand it the way that they were describing it in all of these ophthalmology terms. But it had to do with basically that the eyes, you couldn't get the kinds of light reflections and the kinds of depth and what you see in them in a picture of someone's eyes. that only happens when you're looking into a living eye. Like, and it's very hard to explain, but it had to do with the way that like the light was reflecting off of the back of the, I don't know, I'm going to get this wrong, retina, I think maybe, it was like out off of the back and how that reflects into it. But that what you see in that image is something that you only see in a living eye. So there are all these aspects to it. It's still in incredible conditions, despite the fact that it should have completely deteriorated. People say that it also maintains a constant 98 point, I think it's 6 or 7 temperature, despite the temperature around it. It has been exposed to natural light, sunlight, people touching it and kissing it, all kinds of things for hundreds of years. Like now it's being preserved, but it hasn't been for years. And it should, by all means, even if it hadn't deteriorated, it should be completely blank. Like everything should have faded. Yeah. There's apparently also a level of iridescence to the paints that you only see in natural things like a butterfly wings or that kind of thing, where it changes slightly depending on how you're looking at it. Oh, and so the other thing about her is that the way that she appeared was as a mixed race peasant kind of girl who was a mixture of the native people blood and the Spanish conquistador kind of people who had now come in. And so she had appeared as, one of them, and one that was even mixed race, which, at that time would especially have been frowned upon. And so during the time, I think it had been like 10 years roughly since the time that the Spanish had arrived. They had been trying to convert people to Catholicism, but hadn't really had a lot of luck. After this happened, I think they said like 9,000 people were baptized in the next 10 years because so many people were converted from this miracle in this image. Oh, the other thing, the stars. So they're looking at the stars that are around her. And now, they have the ability to go back and say exactly what the constellations were, exactly what the sky looked like on that particular day back in the 1500s. And they figured out that they are indeed constellations that were around her, and they're in the exact configuration that they would have been in the sky that day. And the difference is, though, there's a slight distortion in the grouping or how close certain ones are as you get towards the edges and stuff. And what they were saying is that is representative of the curvature. Like if you look at something through like a curved kind of lens, the outer areas are going to be a little bit more kind of clumped together. So the constellations are exact, but shown through sort of a curvature, but they're viewed not as the way they would have been viewed if you were standing on Earth and looking up at them, but if you were outside of Earth looking in. That's so, and there's so
awesome.
many aspects of these things, but I was really blown away things. And just the idea that I guess I didn't realize that there was evidence of miracles in that way that were tangible, like that there was something that was tangible that like scientists are like, we cannot figure out how this is, what it's made of, how it was even created. I think the eye is like around the size of a fingernail, and it has all of this detail that you can't even see until you've magnified it like 3,000 times. I mean, all of this stuff was really amazing to me. And then I was recognizing too, I'm being told a lot of things that feel similar to what Juan Diego is being told. And then I'm thinking, okay, I may have just gone completely off on this random tangent that has nothing to do with the meeting. Like, I mean, at this point, I'm pretty far off of the zip code from that I had Googled. So I'm like, all right, well, Tava had suggested that maybe it's a Dewey Decimal number, because I've had a dream that I later went back into in a shamanic journey to get more information. And I was shown the Dewey Decimal number for a book in a library. And I was shown that Dewey Decimal number on the case of the book in a dream. And then I later went back into it and was able to see the title. And so she was thinking, okay, well, maybe this is another one of those Dewey Decimal numbers because it is the right number of digits. We just need to put in, a period. So I look that up, and the Dewey Decimal number, so again, the number was 25290. So the 250s signify Christian pastoral practice and religious orders. 252 specifically designates texts of sermons. The .90 further subdivides the category of texts of sermons to indicate memorial, obituary, biographic, or historical sermons. And we were kind of freaking out about that because it was like, sure, there are thousands of sermons written about this experience and the revelation of Mary to Juan Diego. It would be both historical, biographical, memorial, because they have this huge temple dedicated to her and to this whole thing that holds the Tilma. And so we're like, okay, we kind of expected the Dewey Decimal number to take us in a completely different direction, and it circles right back around to something very specific and a lot like where I'd ended up. And then I was like, something had shown up about that being an angel number. Let's look and see what the angel number thing is. And again, expecting this is going to take us off in a different kind of direction. And it says, angel number 252 in numerology signifies a message of change, balance, and new beginnings. And it was talking about when you get this kind of message, that it is encouraging you to navigate life's challenges with optimism and maintain balance, and to trust in the support of your angels and the universe. So by that point, we were just like, oh my gosh. So every direction that we went with this still kind of looped back around. It all connected. And I feel like there were multiple other things that connections that we drew that I'm not even remembering right now. But that got me thinking too around the subject of miracles and messages. But also I wanted to share it because it's so fascinating in that there are so many different ways you can take messages that you get. You can Google the various parts of it. You can go with your feeling of it. You can have a shamanic journey around it. You can ask your ancestors to support it. And I feel like it's like one of those illustrations that if you're really working towards receiving this, and this is really something that is coming to you, that it's going to find its way regardless of the direction that you choose. So yeah, just wanted to share that, and I can't wait to hear what someone else has to say.
Well, it's
about
funny
it.
because as you were talking about the angel numbers, I'm like, let's look at Pythagorean numerology, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so I was looking at 25290. So 25290 in Pythagorean numerology, you add all the digits up and you reduce it down to one digit. So 2 plus 5 is 7, plus another 2 is 9, plus another 9 is 18, plus 0. So we end up with 1, 8, basically like 18, 1 plus 8, which brings us down to 9. And 9 is very much sort of like the prelude to completion. It says it denotes the end of one cycle and the beginning of another, and it is the number of wisdom. And in witchcraft, like 3 is the number of a goddess. You're looking at 9, which is 3 times 3. A lot of times 9 is seen as a very sort of like female, a very powerful goddess number. And that would certainly line up with the Virgin, right? So I was just like, oh, it's so interesting. And also, you were talking about for the Dewey Decimal System that this was sermons. What are sermons if not an attempt to spread the word, right? They're speaking to large groups of people and getting messages out there. And so I know one of the things that hit me this morning when I was listening to this story is that this story of a miracle was also meant to inspire you personally, that you are currently working on building a new healing modality And so this idea of spreading the word, the completion of an old cycle and the starting of a new one, the idea of like miracles coming forth, and that even when he tries to take a different path and avoid them, he's still there going, I'm sorry, you're not getting away from this. This is what you're meant to do. I was just like, this makes sense to me, that all of this would be brought to you at this particular time, because all of those events that happened to him brought about a conversion, brought about a change, brought about inspiring thousands of people to sort of walk down a different spiritual path. And what are you working on now? A way to frame the lessons and experiences you have had so that other people who want to partake in them can. And you're moving out of one mode or time period of your spiritual training and into a new one. And so I was just like, the parallels there really struck me. This is what Samael had to say while you were singing. There is work to do in this realm, growth and expansion, settling and destruction, transformation, and all that it entails. And as a human, your divine soul chose to inhabit an earthly form so that the experiences could be utilized to reveal divine patterns. You chose to come here, and in doing so, were separated enough to forget. One of the greatest pains in this realm is the pain of loneliness. But we cannot rescue you from it entirely, lest the work you do be negated. It is a balance. How much may we interfere without tipping the scales? How much can we share with you without completely altering the environment? We are careful. We speak softly. We move in natural spaces. And sometimes our presence manifests what you have termed a miracle, an expression of the divine that many see, sometimes intentional, sometimes not. When intentional, they are meant for inspiration. Your men who place themselves high make rules. Consider whether an act is worthy of recognition. I would argue, child, that you alone can decide what is a miracle and what is not.
Wow. I love that. And it's so funny. I was thinking about something this morning that I feel like perfectly aligns with what he was saying. I was walking the dog, and yesterday, one of the things I was talking about was how I feel like Horus is using the mockingbird to communicate with me more and get my attention. And I'll come out and it's doing these elaborate dances and songs and things. And on several occasions, it has really pulled my attention and it has felt really important and different in these moments. The behavior in the song, it's showing up exactly where it did. And then I was walking this morning and there were mockingbirds on like 3 different houses doing their fancy dance, doing literally their song and dance, trying to get the attention of the females and stuff. And I was thinking, this is one of those things that makes you doubt and makes you think, I'm just making this up. I wanted this to be something. I saw this as something that had anything to do with me, when any sort of person who's not in this sort of realm of work, if I were to describe it, would be like, yeah, they're out there doing it now. Is that a message for you too? Like, are you being really narcissistic and all of these things? But I was walking and I was like, no, it's the feeling and the knowing in it. Like I see them out here now and it's like, but they're just doing their mockingbird thing. But there's nothing about this that is jumping out at me going, this is important. This is something to pay attention to. This is a message. There's a connection here. And that feeling I have in my chest when that happens. And I was thinking, I was like, it's not necessarily that it's a behavior the animal doesn't always do, or it's a situation that, couldn't be explained away by a million other people, but it's that knowing that you have in that moment that this is important, this is special. And I feel like that lines up perfectly with what Samael was just saying of like, we don't have to be able to convince, because so many times, you'll receive messages and then there's this thought of, what will people say when I tell them? And most people would be like, that's ridiculous. Would talk you out of it and explain why that was not a miracle, why that was not a real sign, and that you're just making this stuff up. And so it's important to not tell those people, because they're not going to support it. I love that saying, don't go to the post office for milk. Don't go to those people for something they don't have.
Right.
But to remember you're the one who knows. And I think it's just absolutely fascinating that Samael was just saying that.
I have a little story that this reminds me of. When I think I was in middle school. My dad was in the military, and one of the perks of being in the military is that you can basically get on cargo flights and fly around the world dirt cheap. At least I don't know if you can still do it, but back in the day, what they used to do is, say, for example, you wanted to go to Germany, right, from the United States. Well, there's a military base in Germany. They have these cargo flights where they're shipping things to the bases in Germany, and they have, I think it was like 20 or 30 seats on them, and you can pay like nothing, like $50. And now the thing is that the cargo flights may not be on time. The airport you're waiting in is not particularly comfortable. You just have to, be there and grab the next cargo flight to where you want to go. But it does allow you to travel, if you want to, dirt cheap, right? So my parents wanted to go to Germany and take my sister and I to Germany. And so we got on one of these cargo flights and we went over and we spent about a week going to Austria, going all over southern Germany. I have ancestors from that region, and sort of exploring. And we went to Neuschwanstein, the beautiful castle that the Disney castle is modeled after. But we happened to be over there during the week of Easter. And one of the tours that we were on was going, it may have even been the day we went to go see Neuschwanstein. I think it was like the day before Easter or something like that. On the bus on the way back, the tour guide said, we're a little ahead of schedule. There's this really neat cathedral off here in the middle of the country, not close to pretty much anything. We're going to go in there and let you all go see. It's supposed to have been the site of a miracle. So we all get off the bus, and there is this, just in the middle of a field, like on a farm, a full-on cathedral. Like, not in the middle of a city where you would expect it, but just this big cathedral. And there's a farmhouse there. And then there's also this other little tiny, like there's some outbuildings and there's this little tiny building. And the cathedral is, gold and marble. And I mean, it's huge. And so everybody gets off the bus and heads towards the cathedral. And I think I asked the tour guide, like, what's the miracle that is supposed to happen? And she's like, oh, they're going to tell you at the cathedral. And I said, well, I kind of want to walk around a little bit here because it was quite a crowd heading for the cathedral. And she tells me that a couple hundred years ago, there was this man, and he went to a church yard sale, and basically a yard sale. And there was this old statue of the Virgin Mary there, made out of wood, in bad shape. And he felt bad for the statue. And even though it was kind of large and unwieldy, he bought it, put it in his wagon, and takes it home. And he builds this little tiny chapel on his farm, like probably the size of what like our master bedroom is today. And it's got like a couple of seats in it, but he's cleaned the statue up and put it in a place of honor in the front of this little building that he's built. And he starts going outside every day to pray. And one day, when he's sitting there praying alone, he looks up and there are tears running down the statue's face. So, understandably, he freaks out, right? Because the statue's made of wood. And he goes hauling to the closest church and says, "There's a miracle happening with this statue on my farm. It cries." And they said, "We're so sorry, but I think the rules for a miracle are like it has to be witnessed by like a priest or like 3 priests and a nun. There's very strict rules for what passes muster as a miracle." So they go, "We're really sorry. You're not qualified to see this. Let us know if it happens again." So he goes back a couple weeks later. Here's the statue crying again. And he's up there like it's real tears. He can touch them. He's trying to figure out like, is the wood like emitting sap or something? Like, what's going on? This continues to happen where he keeps going back to the church and going, "No, I'm not kidding. It cries." Well, like, I guess eventually it gets to the point where he's telling his neighbors, and a couple of the neighbors come by and a couple of them witness it too. And then I think at some point they manage to like drag a nun in there and the nun sees it, right? But it still isn't enough. Now word is spreading all over southern Germany. And the man comes out of his house one day and there are like hundreds of people on his farm that are all coming to see this statue. And they just keep coming and they're camping and they're living on his land to pray to this statue in this itty bitty chapel. So he goes back to the church and he's like, "I'm so sorry, miracle or not, I've got a couple thousand faithful making pilgrimages to my farm at this point. You've got to do something." And so at this point, the church, I guess, comes out and is like, "Oh man." And the end result was they ended up building this massive cathedral. I don't know that it was ever actually technically considered a miracle, but they needed to put something there because of the outpouring of emotion and devotion from the faithful. And so what I say to the tour guide as everyone's headed towards I said, "Is the little building still standing? Like, where is the statue?" And she said, "Oh, when they built the cathedral, there was this huge procession and they carried this little homely hand carved wooden statue in, and she's at the front of the cathedral." And I said, "Yeah, but that's not where the miracle happens. Like, where did the miracle happen?"
Yeah.
And she said, "That little building over there." So I go over and it's open. And I go inside and there's like 4 little tiny pews and this empty space where she used to stand. And I sat in there and I just couldn't shake the feeling that she was in the wrong place now, right? That she'd been moved from where that connection between the divine was happening. That connection is what motivated thousands of people over time to come to this place and practice their faith. And I then, left, and there were a bunch of tour buses at this place. I sat in there for a long time and sort of meditated in there. And I went outside and there was this man sitting on the ground carving crucifixes. And my parents had told me I was allowed to like get one souvenir from the trip. And I decided that's what I wanted. So I got a crucifix from right outside the doorway. And then I made my way over to the cathedral. And I go in and it is just like a parking lot of people. It's right before Easter. There are tons and tons and tons. There's so many people in the aisles that you can't really move. And here's this little wooden statue way far away from everybody, way up high. And everything around her is just gold leaf and, marble. And she looks so out of place. It just like everything is this massive homage to what they assumed was holy, which meant expensive and gold. But I couldn't help thinking that that little tiny chapel where I was the only person in there was actually the holier of the two places. And that was an experience that I've kept with me for a very long time. And so when Samael said, I would argue, child, that you alone can decide what is a miracle and what is not. It didn't matter ultimately whether or not the church declared that a miracle. The people came, right? Word of mouth spread it. And the people decided it was a miracle, whether or not it was ever sanctioned by the larger organization. And they changed and moved things. Yeah, so that resonated with me.
That's such a beautiful story. Yeah, I it's amazing just hearing you tell it. I could just feel the resonance with that little building. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's I feel like it's such an example of how we take something simple and beautiful and connected, and then tend to take something and then alter it, think, oh well, it happened in this really humble situation, in this really humble surroundings, and then it's like, oh well, now that we recognize this is divine, we need to treat it the way you treat something divine or miraculous, and then take it completely out of its original context, put it somewhere where it no longer fits, and then it's more about the gold and the marble and all the things, and the original connection, is
Right.
left. It reminds me a lot of what Samael talks about, God is in the wild. That
Yeah.
that humble little building that was built entirely from just heartfelt devotion and love for this statue, and carving in his personal relationship, it sounds like, is what really drew her essence into that, and her outpouring of love.
It's so interesting to me because, I mean, I'm not an expert on miracles and saints, but I have heard and read a little bit about them. You never hear or rarely hear of the miracle stories never start off with there was an extremely powerful man practicing in a very expensive church, and then the divine showed up. It's always the guy with the cloak and the sick uncle walking along his trail, or the man who picked up the statue at the churchyard sale that nobody else wanted. And that is when the divine comes through and speaks. That's when it reaches through. It's almost as if perhaps we should take the hint
Yeah.
that the place to spend our money is not on an 8-story buttressed building, because we imagine that that is how the divine wants to be glorified, right? If the divine is appearing in humble places, then all of us living in a more humble situation, all of us spending our time trying to build community with few resources, all of us trying to reach out to the divine. It doesn't require a big title or a big church or any of that. The miracles happen in the grassroots, right where we are. And the fact that we doubt ourselves, I think, is one of the reasons that sometimes they appear. Samael says their encouragement often to us that we have not been forgotten, that we are not alone. And he says divine expression that many see, sometimes intentional, sometimes not. It sounds like every now and then you get a divine being who comes down and is like, whoops, I stepped there and now it's a pilgrimage site. My bad. Like a little bit too much energy came off there. And now they've got a 500-year-old agave weaving. Like, my bad. Sorry, guys. But this idea of inspiring on a smaller level. And I remember I had, this was right after that portal appeared to me that one night with it had all the numbers on it. I don't
Mm-hmm.
know if you remember, but I said something to Samael about why do I get to see this? And he laughed and said something about who would believe you, right? I find it really interesting, this idea of if we've been put here in mortal bodies to do work. And if we can remember our divine form completely when we're here, it negates the work that we're doing. We have to be in a forgetting state to discover the things that we are discovering. But they don't want to leave us without inspiration. They don't want to leave us without connection. But it's a very delicate balance. If, Makate just pops down in the middle of a shopping mall and is like, hey, everybody, like I'm going to make the roof blow off and all of you are suddenly going to be returned for 5 minutes to your remembering state. See ya. Like that's too much. That will alter the work that we individually are doing. So they don't want to abandon us. They also can't come in too much. They can't heal every sick person. They can't stop every natural disaster. It negates the human experience, but they don't want us to be completely gone. And so they appear in a field of roses in the middle of December or at a churchyard sale in Germany.
So, this seems like the perfect place to leave off for this week. This conversation, as it often does, continued for another hour. And so, this just seemed like the right place to leave things for now. But I didn't want to leave you without a song. I did sing at the very end of our conversation, but it felt to me like we needed to have a song that really helped to integrate this particular section of the conversation to leave you in a really good, grounded, and centered place, and to really help to integrate specifically the messages and the energies and the stories and the things that you heard today. So, wishing you all wonderful blessings and hope that you enjoy this song. And I hope that you join us next week to hear the rest of this episode. Oh.